What is that smell? Did someone drag in a stray off the street? Captain Gerald Morrow said it loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear.
He was looking directly at the only black woman on the plane, not glancing, looking. The kind of look that measures a person and finds them wanting before a single word has been exchanged.
She was in seat 2A, window seat, dark slacks, cream blouse, a paperback novel open in her lap. Her carry-on was already stowed.
Her seatbelt was already buckled. She had done everything right. That was the problem. For a man like Gerald Morrow, there was no correct way for a woman who looked like her to sit in first class on his aircraft.
She looked up from the book. Are you talking to me? Who else would I be talking to? She held out her phone.
Digital boarding pass. Her name, Renata Cole, printed cleanly above the seat assignment. 2A, first class, platinum tier.
11 consecutive years of loyalty with Horizon Pacific Airways. He barely looked at it. He held out his palm flat.
ID. She opened her wallet. Virginia driver's license. She placed it in his hand. What happened next took 3 seconds.
He turned the card over once, like he was inspecting counterfeit currency. Then he bent it at the center with both thumbs, and he cracked it in half with a sound that cut through the quiet hum of the cabin like a gunshot.
The laminate split. The photo, her face, split with it. He dropped both pieces onto her lap. When we land, security will be waiting for you.
I suggest you have a good reason for why you're sitting here. Otherwise, you're going to have a very long day.
14 passengers in first class. Dead silence. Not one of them moved. The only sound was the faint vibration of the jet bridge still connected to the door.
What Gerald Morrow did not know, what was about to reduce 24 years of a decorated career to ash, was that he had just destroyed the identification of a sitting federal judge of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia.
Appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, one of the most respected civil rights jurists in the country, and from the moment he opened his mouth, the Honorable Renata Cole was already composing the record.
5:30 in the morning, Fairfax County, Virginia. The house was quiet the way only a judge's house can be quiet, ordered, deliberate, everything in its place, because imprecision costs people years of their lives, and she never forgot that.
Judge Renata Cole sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a manila folder open beside her laptop.
Nothing classified. Nothing from the docket. Just a letter she'd been meaning to write to her niece, a sophomore at Spelman, who'd sent a text 2 weeks ago that said, "Auntie, is the law actually real?
Or is it just for some people?" She hadn't answered yet. She wasn't sure she had the right words, not yet.
She closed the folder, rinsed her mug, and walked to the bedroom to finish packing. The reunion had been scheduled for 7 months.
Her older sister, Claudette, had rented a property outside of Atlanta big enough for 4 generations. Renata had canceled the last 2 years running.
Not this time. She opened the drawer of her nightstand. Inside, in its leather folio, her judicial ID, gold seal of the federal judiciary.
Her name, her title, her photograph, all of it official, all of it carrying the weight of a lifetime's work.
She held it for a moment, then she put it back, reached for her personal wallet instead. Driver's license, 2 credit cards.
Her Horizon Pacific loyalty card. That was enough for a weekend with family. It was a 2-second decision. She would turn it over in her mind every day for the next 3 weeks.
Her phone lit up on the dresser. Marcus Webb, her senior law clerk. 11 years together. Judge Cole. Just want to say. And I am not supposed to be doing this at 5:30 in the morning. But the Dunmore ruling came down from the Fourth Circuit at midnight.
They affirmed everything, all of it. She sat on the edge of the bed. 6 years of litigation, 14 plaintiffs.
One ruling that rewrote housing discrimination enforcement across 3 states. She was quiet for a moment, tell the team, and Marcus, go back to sleep.
He laughed. Already back in bed. Safe travels, Judge. She picked up her carry-on and walked out the door. Reagan Dulles was 40 minutes in the low morning traffic.
She drove a 7-year-old Volvo with no vanity plates, no bumper stickers, nothing that announced who she was. She had learned that lesson early.
Announced people become targets. Quiet people build records. And records outlast everything. She parked, checked in at the counter, and walked to Gate C-17 for Horizon Pacific Flight 2241, non-stop to Atlanta.
She did not know yet that a man she had never met was already on that aircraft, reviewing the first-class manifest and doing what he always did, deciding who belonged.
Let's talk about Gerald Morrow. Because men like him do not appear from nowhere. They are built, over time, by a system that rewards their certainty and never once asks them to examine it.
24 years with Horizon Pacific Airways. Captain of a wide-body fleet. 4 consecutive years on the President's Flight Quality Panel, which is the kind of thing you frame and hang in the hallway near your commendations, which Morrow had done.
He walked through that hallway every time he entered the crew lounge, and he always slowed down when he passed the photo.
He was 61 years old. Silver gray temples, the kind of jaw that looks like it was designed for authority. The posture of a man who had never once stood in a room and doubted his right to be there.
When he shook your hand, he did it the way men do, when they want you to register it. Firm, held a beat too long, releasing on his timeline.
His first officer that morning was a 37-year-old named Dale Pruitt, 6 years flying with Morrow. He was competent, quiet, and deeply aware of how Horizon Pacific assigned routes.
He'd watched 3 people get reassigned to overnight cargo runs after they pushed back on Morrow in the cockpit. He had a mortgage and a kid in middle school, and a wife who was finishing her nursing degree.
So Dale Pruitt said very little to Gerald Morrow. That was not agreement. It was arithmetic. Morrow scrolled through the first-class manifest the way he always did, not looking at what the screen told him, but looking for what it didn't.
The manifest listed names, seat assignments, loyalty tiers, meal preferences, accessibility requests. It did not list race. It didn't need to.
Morrow kept that column in his head. He always had. He stood at the cabin door at 6:55 a.m.
And he looked at his aircraft the way a landlord looks at a property, with a proprietary satisfaction that misses all the actual people in it.
He liked the walkthrough. He liked shaking hands. It made him feel like a statesman. Captain of something larger than a machine.
Row 1A. A white man in a linen blazer, silver watch, laptop bag from a law firm. Morrow extended his hand before the man even looked up.
Welcome aboard, sir. Beautiful day to fly. Firm handshake. Warm smile. Row 1C. An older black man with a cane and a worn Bible on his tray table.
Reverend Otis Drummond, 73 years old, seat 1C, returning home to his congregation in Atlanta after a medical consultation at Georgetown.
Morrow's eyes hit the cane, moved on. No handshake, no greeting, not even the courtesy of acknowledgement. Row 3A, a white woman in a tailored pantsuit.
Barbara Whitfield, General Counsel at a tech firm, already reading case briefs. Welcome aboard, counselor. Let us know if there's anything you need.
Smile, handshake, the works. Row 4A and 4B, a couple of matching Horizon Pacific jackets. Morrow practically lit up. Look at that.
Loyalty members. Love to see it. He touched the seatback rail like he was greeting old friends. Then he reached row 2.
Renata Cole looked up from her novel, a biography of Thurgood Marshall. She'd been reading it for 6 weeks between rulings.
She was on the chapter about Brown versus Board, the oral argument, the room full of people who had never imagined what was about to become law.
Morrow's smile didn't vanish. It did something worse. It tightened. A smile that had learned, over decades, exactly how much warmth to withhold without being technically visible about it.
His hand stayed at his side. Boarding pass. She held up her phone. The display was clear. Renata Cole. Seat 2A.
Platinum tier. First class. He stared at the screen for a long time. The kind of stare that is actually a refusal dressed as scrutiny.
I need to see a physical boarding pass. It's digital. That's what the airline issues. He looked at her again.
The same measuring look. Then he said, quietly enough that only the first few rows could hear, "You sure this is your seat?"
She met his eyes. She had spent 31 years as a law clerk, a federal public defender, an appellate attorney, and a federal judge.
She had sat across from men who tried to make her feel small in rooms built to produce justice. She knew how to hold a gaze.
Seat 2A. Window. Platinum. Yes, this is my seat. Morrow stepped back. He didn't move on. He stood there at the end of her row for a moment that lasted too long, and then he said, loud enough for the full cabin, "I'll need to verify this with the gate agent."
Everyone else. We'll be ready to push back shortly. He turned and walked toward the forward galley.
Colette Hargrove, the lead first-class flight attendant, 22 years of service, a mother of 3, a woman who had spent a career perfecting the ability to not react, stood by the service cart and kept her eyes on the champagne flutes.
She had heard every word. Her jaw was tight. She did not look at Renata Cole. She told herself it wasn't her place.
She would tell herself that for the rest of the morning, and it would feel less true every time she thought it.
Renata Cole went back to her book, Thurgood Marshall, Brown versus Board, the long argument that changed everything. She turned the page.
She did not show them her hands shaking. The plane pushed back from the gate at 7:18. By 7:23, Morrow was back in the cabin.
He didn't come alone. He brought a Horizon Pacific ground operations supervisor named Roy Garrett, who had been flagged by radio, pulled off another task, and walked down the jet bridge before the doors sealed.
Roy was 45, a 20-year company man, the kind of employee who survived by never being the most visible person in any room.
He had a clipboard. He looked uncomfortable. Morrow pointed at Renata Cole. I need to verify this passenger's right to occupy this seat.
There's been an irregularity with the boarding pass. Roy opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the clipboard. He'd already pulled the manifest on his way down.
Everything was clean. Name matched. Seat matched. Loyalty tier matched. There was no irregularity. Captain, I'm looking at the record right now.
The passenger. Morrow cut him off. I'm asking you to verify it in person. Do your job. The cabin was completely silent.
14 people watching a man in a pilot's uniform point at a woman sitting quietly in a seat she had paid for.
The Reverend in 1C, Reverend Otis Drummond, 73 years old, had put down his Bible. He was watching with the kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from a very long memory.
Roy Garrett looked at the manifest. He looked at Renata Cole. He looked at Morrow.
And then Roy Garrett did the thing that would define him at every dinner table conversation about this morning for the rest of his life. He said nothing, looked at his shoes, and held up the clipboard as if the papers on it might resolve something.
They didn't. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your identification, for the record. She opened her wallet. She placed her Virginia driver's license in Morrow's outstretched hand.
He turned it over. Then he said, very clearly, in front of 14 passengers, a first officer audible through the open cockpit door, and a lead flight attendant frozen 3 feet away. This doesn't look right to me. He bent the card. The snap of the laminate was small and final, like a bone breaking. He dropped both halves onto her tray table. The photo, her face, her name, her address, split cleanly in 2. You people always find a way into spaces that weren't meant for you.
When we land, you're going to answer some questions. I'm documenting this as a security concern. Then he turned, walked back to the cockpit, and closed the door.
Nobody moved. The air in the cabin was a specific kind of thick, not grief, not anger. Something more suffocating. The collective shame of a room full of people who had just watched something happen and were already deciding whether they had seen it.
Barbara Whitfield in 3A had her phone out. She wasn't filming. She was writing. Every word, verbatim, time-stamped into a notes application.
Name of the captain, name of the operations supervisor, seat numbers of everyone present. She was a lawyer. She knew exactly what a witness statement was, and she was building one in real time.
From seat 1C, Reverend Otis Drummond uncapped his pen. He wrote the time on the blank inside cover of his Bible.
He didn't know why, exactly. He just knew it mattered. He had lived long enough to know that when something like this happened, the only mercy available was documentation.
The young man in 5A, a 26-year-old graduate student in a window seat, who had been trying to look at his phone and not make eye contact, sat very still.
He did not write anything down. He did not say anything. He would spend the next 3 days thinking about that.
He would not be able to make himself feel better about it. And that, honestly, is the most honest thing in this story.
Colette Hargrove, the flight attendant, walked slowly down the aisle with a bottle of water. She reached Renata Cole's row.
She set the water on the tray table without a word. Without looking up, she started to turn away. Renata Cole said quietly, "Thank you, Colette."
Colette Hargrove stopped. She turned back. For one moment, her composure cracked. A fraction, less than a second, and something human and horrified moved across her face.
Then she nodded once and walked back to the galley. It was the smallest possible thing. But in a cabin that small, it was not nothing.
Renata Cole picked up the two halves of her driver's license. She placed them carefully in the front pocket of her bag.
She did not crumple them. She did not throw them. She held them for a moment, pressed together at the break, the way you might hold something broken that you intend to keep.
Then she picked up her book. She found her page, Thurgood Marshall, The Argument, The Room, she read. The plane landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 10:47 in the morning.
Before the wheels touched down, Renata Cole had made 2 phone calls. The first was 9 minutes long, to a man in Washington, whose name she had on speed dial for 11 years, and had never once needed for a personal matter.
The second call was 40 seconds long, and went to her sister Claudette, who answered on the first ring, heard the tone of her sister's voice, and said simply, "I'm coming to the airport."
"Tell me when you're at the curb." Morrow's radio call to ground operations at Atlanta came in at 10:42, while they were still in descent.
Passenger in seat 2A, possible fraudulent boarding pass situation. Security requested at gate for questioning. He used the word combative.
He used it twice. He filed it in the incident log. Filed under, security concern captain initiated. The timestamp was 10:42A.
What Gerald Morrow did not know, and what would make that incident log entry the single most consequential document of his life, was who was waiting at that gate.
Not security. The gate agent, a young woman named Priya, had been at the counter since 6 a.m. She had scanned Renata Cole's boarding pass at 7:08 and said, "Good morning, Judge Cole."
"Have a wonderful flight. It was procedure. Horizon Pacific ran passenger names through their loyalty database during premium boarding. Platinum members got name recognition service."
That meant Priya had seen the full profile. She knew who was in seat 2A. She had also, in the 40 minutes since Morrow's radio call, made her own phone call.
To her regional supervisor, who called legal, who called the office of the chief operating officer of Horizon Pacific Airways.
Gerald Morrow stepped out of the cockpit at gate C12 and found, instead of a nervous passenger being escorted away by 2 security guards, the following: his gate agent standing very still.
His regional operations director, a woman named Sandra Voss, standing beside her. A man in a dark suit who had not introduced himself yet.
2 uniformed federal officers from the U.S. Marshals Service who had jurisdiction over threats to federal judiciary personnel.
And Renata Cole, standing with her carry-on at her side, her torn driver's license in a small, clear plastic bag, looking at him the way a judge looks at a defendant who has just made things considerably worse for himself.
Sandra Voss spoke first. Her voice was the kind of controlled that takes effort. "Captain Morrow, I need your incident log."
He handed it over. He was already recalibrating, already searching his memory for the architecture of a defensible narrative. He'd been here before. Not here, exactly, but in the territory of escalation, of having gone farther than he intended, of needing to manage the aftermath.
He'd always been able to manage it. He looked at Renata Cole. There must be some misunderstanding. She didn't answer him.
She was looking at the man in the dark suit who had stepped forward and opened a leather folio. Inside, a photograph, a seal, a name.
Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. His name was Andrew Fisk. He was there because the 2 calls Renata Cole had made in the air were very good calls.
Captain Morrow, I'm going to need you to come with me. The words landed differently than any words had landed on Gerald Morrow in 24 years.
He looked at Renata Cole. He looked at Fisk. He looked at his incident log in Sandra Voss's hands. I was acting on a security concern.
You filed a report describing a passenger as combative, said Andrew Fisk. The incident log shows the word twice. Can you tell me specifically what combative behavior you observed?
Morrow's jaw worked. She questioned my authority on the aircraft. "She asked you if you were speaking to her," said Priya from behind the counter, her voice steady.
That's what she said. I checked. 3 passengers confirmed it on the ground. She didn't raise her voice. She showed her boarding pass when asked.
She complied with every request. Roy Garrett, the operations supervisor who had stood there with his clipboard and said nothing, was sitting in a chair against the wall.
He was staring at the floor. He knew what was coming. He knew because he had watched it happen,
and he had a choice, and he had made the wrong one. And he was going to have to say so to someone with federal authority within the next 30 minutes.
The passenger in question, said Andrew Fisk, is the Honorable Renata Cole, United States District Judge, Eastern District of Virginia, appointed 2009, confirmed with a 91-9 Senate vote.
You filed a false federal incident report describing her as a security threat on your aircraft. You physically destroyed her government-issued identification in the presence of 14 witnesses.
And according to 3 separate passenger accounts already collected in the last 18 minutes, you used language, and I'll ask you to stop me if any of this is inaccurate, that described a first-class passenger using racially derogatory terms.
The gate area was very quiet, Gerald Morrow said. I was maintaining the safety of my aircraft. Nobody spoke. That sentence sat in the air of the gate area, like something that had fallen and shattered, and everyone was waiting to see who would pretend not to notice the pieces.
Sandra Voss closed the incident log. She did not give it back. The investigation was not quiet.
In the way that investigations into federal office holders are not quiet, in the way that incidents involving recorded witness statements and security footage and 12 separate passenger interviews are not quiet. It was very loud.
Sandra Voss issued the suspension, pending investigation within the hour. Gerald Morrow surrendered his gate badge at 12:43 p.m.
He walked out through a service corridor, not the main terminal. He did not walk past the framed photo of himself in the crew lounge.
That photo had already been taken down. Dale Pruitt, the first officer who had heard every word through the open cockpit door and said nothing, submitted a voluntary statement to investigators within 24 hours.
He listed every specific thing he had heard. He listed the time of each. He wrote at the bottom, I should have acted.
I did not. I am prepared to accept whatever professional consequence is appropriate. It was the most honest thing he had written in 6 years of flying with Morrow, and it was the thing that ultimately distinguished his case from Morrow's.
One man chose to keep building the record. One man chose to keep defending it. Colette Hargrove, the lead flight attendant, was interviewed on the second day.
She answered every question with exactness. Yes, she had heard the initial remark. Yes, she had been 3 feet from the identification being destroyed.
No, she had not intervened at the time. She had brought a glass of water. She was asked whether she believed that was sufficient.
She said, after a long pause, no. She said she had spent many years learning to function inside a system that rewarded not making things difficult for senior crew. She said she didn't know how to make that sound better, and she wasn't going to try. Her honesty cost her, and it also, in the end, was the thing that saved her.
Mandatory retraining, 60-day leave, no termination. She went back to work and became, within a year, one of the loudest voices on the Crew Safety Reporting Committee.
Some people need to lose something before they learn what they were actually protecting. Roy Garrett submitted his statement on day 3.
He described the moment he stood at the end of that aisle with his clipboard and chose to hand the weight of his silence to a woman who had done nothing wrong.
He resigned before the formal disciplinary hearing. He wrote a personal letter to Judge Cole that was 2 pages long.
She read it, she kept it, she did not respond to it, not yet, but she kept it. The FAA referral came down in the 3rd week.
The false incident report alone was enough for a formal certification review.
Describing a compliant passenger as combative in a federal aviation document filed under the captain's signature, when that passenger was a sitting federal judge who had at no point raised her voice or made any gesture of aggression. That was not a paperwork error.
That was a federal document falsified to justify a racially motivated removal. The words have consequences. The signature makes it permanent.
Gerald Morrow's attorney issued a statement. The captain acted in accordance with his understanding of aviation security protocols and did not intend any discriminatory.
Judge Renata Cole's attorney issued a response that was 4 lines long. Our client did not board an aircraft to become the subject of anyone's intent.
She boarded to attend a family reunion. She left the aircraft with her identification in 2 pieces and a federal incident report describing her, falsely, as a threat.
The intent can be debated in court. The conduct is already in the record. The conduct was in fact already in the record.
in more places than Morrow had imagined possible. Barbara Whitfield's witness statement, the Reverend Drummond's time-stamped note in the cover of his Bible.
Priya's gate log, the security footage from the jet bridge, the gate camera, the terminal corridor, 14 passenger interviews, Morrow's own handwritten incident report.
He had documented himself with extraordinary thoroughness. He had just assumed, as he had always assumed, that no documentation would ever be used against him.
3 prior complaints. That was what the internal investigation found next. 3 separate passengers across 3 separate flights. 2017, 2020, 2023. What FISA Deskinspekten get Captain Gerald Morrow with Horizon Pacific Airways.
Each one reviewed internally. Each one closed. Notes in the file resolved. No further action required. 3 people had sat in that seat before Renata Cole.
3 people had said, "This man targeted me because of how I look." 3 times the system had picked up the complaint, turned it over, and set it down gently in a drawer.
The regional VP of operations issued a statement that used the phrase systemic failure 14 times. He was right. It was systemic.
It just took a sitting federal judge to make the system look at itself. Horizon Pacific Airways announced a full reform package.
Real-time logging for all captain-initiated passenger challenges. An independent ombudsman, reporting to the board, not the crew hierarchy, to review all discrimination complaints.
Mandatory annual civil rights and implicit bias training for all flight crew. No exceptions, no deferrals, no online checkbox. Classroom.
In person, every year. And any incident involving the physical destruction or confiscation of a passenger's personal property or identification would trigger an automatic federal incident review.
No supervisor discretion, no quiet resolution, no drawer. The CEO stood in front of a room of reporters at their headquarters in Charlotte and said, "We had the information to act, and we did not act on it."
That is not one employee's failure. It belongs to this company. We are listening now. Then, he sat down and said nothing else, because he understood that there are moments when the only correct response to what you've done is to stop talking.
Renata Cole filed a civil rights complaint with the Department of Transportation and a federal lawsuit alleging racial discrimination under the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
The suit also named Horizon Pacific as a corporate defendant. The company's legal team spent 9 days in conference before recommending settlement.
The number was not disclosed. The written apology was public. It named Renata Cole. It named Reverend Otis Drummond. It named every passenger who had sat in that cabin and been asked to witness something they should never have had to witness.
The settlement included one provision that Judge Cole had insisted on and that no amount of negotiation would remove. An independent civil rights audit of Horizon Pacific's discrimination complaint process, conducted annually for 5 years by an external firm chosen by the plaintiff's attorneys.
Published publicly. Every year, not summarized. Published. The cover page of the investigation's final report carried a single piece of evidence designated Exhibit A.
It was a photograph. 2 halves of a Virginia driver's license, placed side by side on a gray background. The laminate cracked down the center.
The photograph split exactly through her left eye. Beneath it, the caption read, "Physical evidence of destruction of passenger identification by flight crew."
Flight 2T241, August 14th. Nothing else. The investigators had understood that some evidence introduces itself. Gerald Morrow's FAA certification hearing took place on a Tuesday in a room with no windows.
He had obtained counsel. His counsel was good. His counsel had reviewed every document and every precedent, and had told him privately in the hallway outside that the false incident report was the problem from which nothing else could be saved.
He had filed a federal document he had called a compliant passenger combative. He had put his signature under the claim that Renata Cole had created a security concern on his aircraft.
That document was now a federal exhibit in an ongoing civil rights proceeding, and it carried his name, and it said the thing he had said, in print with his own hand, for anyone who ever needed to look at it. At the hearing, when asked to describe the events of that morning, Gerald Morrow said, "I was responding to what I perceived as an anomaly in the boarding process." The lead investigator read back his incident report. "Read it slowly, every word."
She's a federal judge, she said when she finished.
11 years platinum. No incident history, no prior flags. She thanked the gate agent. She read a book. She didn't raise her voice.
Tell me what the anomaly was. Morrow looked at his hands. He did not answer. His certification to fly commercial aircraft was suspended pending the completion of the investigation, with a recommendation for permanent revocation.
24 years. 4 commendations. The framed photo that used to hang in the crew hallway, all of it folded into a manila envelope and placed in a file drawer that he would never be able to open again.
He sat outside the building afterward for a long time. His attorney was on the phone with the appeals office.
Morrow wasn't listening. He was thinking, for the first time, with something approaching honesty, about a woman reading a book on a Tuesday morning.
Going to see her family. Carrying nothing that announced who she was, because she had never needed to announce herself.
Because she knew the value of a quiet record. He had destroyed 2 pieces of a card that could be replaced in 48 hours at any DMV.
He had built a case against himself that would take a decade to outlast, if it could be outlasted at all.
He had spent 24 years accumulating the authority to decide who belonged. And in one morning, in front of 14 witnesses and a gate camera, and 3 passengers who wrote everything down, he had used that authority to destroy himself.
He was not a stupid man. That was the part that would follow him. He was not a stupid man, and he had done it anyway, because for 24 years the system had rewarded him for it, and no one had made it cost anything.
It had cost something now. 6 weeks later, Reverend Otis Drummond wrote a letter. He wrote it by hand, in blue ink, on paper from the small office behind the pulpit of his church in southwest Atlanta.
He addressed it to the Honorable Renata Cole, the United States District Court, Eastern District of Virginia. He wrote, "Dear Judge Cole,
I am 73 years old. I have been a minister for 41 years, and a black man in America for all 73 of them.
I have lived through things that younger people now read about in books with chapter summaries and discussion questions. I know what it is to be in a room and feel the air change when someone looks at you and decides you are the problem."
He wrote, "I watched what happened on that aircraft. I watched you put those pieces in your bag like they were something worth keeping.
I watched you open your book, and I want you to know that the moment you opened that book, after what had just happened, was the most dignified thing I have seen in 41 years of ministry."
You did not perform your dignity for him. You simply still had it. He couldn't take it. He never could.
He wrote, "What you did afterward, building the record, holding the system to account, making it look at itself. My generation marched for the day that would be possible."
We did not all live to see it. Some of us are still here. I am still here. I saw it.
He wrote, "God bless you, Judge Cole, and God bless the ones after you, who will board that plane and not have to do what you did."
She pinned the letter to the corkboard in her chambers, beside a printed copy of the Dunmore ruling. One was 112 pages.
One was 2 pages, handwritten. Both of them were evidence of the same thing, the work matters. Dale Pruitt flew his first flight with a new captain 3 days after Morrow's suspension was finalized.
A morning departure from Charlotte to Philadelphia. First class half full. When the aircraft reached cruising altitude, he unbuckled, stood up, and walked out of the cockpit into the cabin.
Row by row, every passenger. Good morning. Welcome aboard. The same greeting, the same eye contact, the same handshake, every single one.
Nobody had asked him to do it. No policy required it. He'd just decided that anyone sitting on his aircraft on his watch was going to be seen.
Not checked, not questioned, seen. In 1C, an older black woman with a tote bag and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, headed to see her daughter for the first time since the pandemic.
He shook her hand and said, "Welcome aboard. Glad you're here." She looked mildly surprised. Then she smiled. It was a small thing.
But systems do not change in boardrooms. They change when one person in a cockpit decides to do something differently the next time.
And then the time after that. And the time after that. Until it becomes what flying is supposed to feel like.
In chambers on a Wednesday morning, Judge Renata Cole opened a new case file, Complex Employment Discrimination. 3 plaintiffs, 1 defendant company, 6 years of documented misconduct, and 6 years of documented silence around it.
The kind of case that takes 2 years to try and a career to understand. She read the first page.
She pulled out a legal pad. She uncapped her pen. Her law clerk Marcus knocked on the half-open door. The Dunmore response briefs are in.
She didn't look up. Set them on the left stack. He set them down. Started to leave. Marcus. He stopped.
You still have that note your professor wrote you first year. The one about the law being real. He was quiet for a second.
Yeah, I kept it. Good. She looked up. Keep it where you can read it on the hard days. He nodded.
He left. He understood, without her having to explain it, that she wasn't just talking about him. She went back to the file.
The case. The 6 years of silence around it. She was going to listen to all of it. She was going to read every page.
She was going to make the record complete and accurate and permanent, because that was what the law was for, and because some people in this country were still waiting, had been waiting, were always waiting, for the system to finally sit down and pay attention.
She was paying attention. She had always been paying attention. That was the thing Gerald Morrow had never understood. Not about her.
Not about the woman he looked at, and saw only what she was not. She was always building the record.
Now let me ask you something. If you were in that cabin, not Renata Cole, not Reverend Drummond, not Barbara Whitfield with her phone and her legal pad, just you, in your seat, watching a man in a pilot's uniform snap a woman's ID in half and tell her she doesn't belong there.
What do? Do you write it down? Do you say something? Do you look at your screen and decide it's not your business?
There is no wrong answer, but there is an honest one. Drop it in the comments. I want to read it.
And if this story made you feel something, angry or uncomfortable, or something you can't quite name but can't shake off, hit like.
Share it with someone who needs to hear that the record matters. Subscribe if you want more stories about people who refuse to be invisible.
Because justice does not always arrive on time, but sometimes, it was already sitting in seat 2A, waiting.